when Trump says you won't have a country, you are no longer going to be the face of your country, quote unquote, your country. And there's something that feels like you've lost.
I think the cocktail that you see is something like fear, loss, and nostalgia. If they kind of all get mixed up together, and then you do end up doing things like, well, making kind of rationalizations. Well, things are so bad, things are so dire that these principles, I can just set aside my principles, right, because I need to achieve this end.
If you believe that the greatness of the country is the product of you being there.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So now not only are you giving up you and your spot, but you feel like you're giving up greatness.
Juneteenth.
Yep.
Then July 4th. And then all the way, and we're going to have a big election cycle into the midterm elections, right? So it's going to be this big old fight over who are we as a country? Who do we want to be as a country? With these clashing visions. That vision of the country, a kind of promised land for people of European descent, like that's who we are. Or we can be a pluralistic country where everybody stands on equal footing before the law, regardless of race and religion.
But it didn't feel like it feels like there's some shift in all of it, where it moved from, man, this is what the country should be, to we are going to make it that thing. Is that true, or is that just recent bias?
I think that's dead on. That's really a good insight. Here's what's happened.
All right, here we go. What's happening out there, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Color Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. My name is Marcus Lloyd, and with me here is Antwuan Malone. What's up, Antwuan?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us for this here episode of Color Commentary. So glad to be here with my friend.
Yes, friend. We've been friends a long time now.
Yes.
A long time.
Been a minute.
It has been a minute. We've been through a lot of different things together, and we get to do the show and enjoying this, this beautiful Texas day. You know what I mean? It's
not too bad.
It's not too bad. Sometimes I talk to my friends who are in different parts of the country, and they're like, "How is it living in Texas?" And again, there's all this subtext underneath it.
Oh yeah,
It's not about weather. It's never about weather.
It's not that kind of weather.
Yeah, that's right. It's
political
not about
weather. Yeah,
that's right, because it's kind of interesting out here. But it's been interesting as we've gotten through some of the primary stuff that we've had going on here, and obviously there's stuff coming up, and just kind of watching the way in which Texas is kind of maneuvering. So I'm always interested to kind of watch those waves of change, if you will, and see what that means, and who are the people who are popping up. And we've seen a lot of changes in Texas for a while, but
100%.
It's still a state. You know what I'm saying?
And, and lots of people are coming to the state, and so
that's probably what a lot of it is.
Lots of kinds of people are coming to the state, if you will, and so. And they're bringing their culture with them.
That's right.
And it's causing a lot of questions and concerns. I know that there's like a lot of Muslim movement.
My gosh, yes.
In our area, the South Asian population is increasing, and there's like complaint around it. And then you always have your black, white stuff that kind of goes on too, and then we got the immigration and Hispanic. So it's just a
smorgasbord
of all kinds of
things that we get to
right here in our area. So we often have much to talk about.
Well, and that's right. And I mean, that's what I think is fun about today's show, honestly, because everything that you're talking about, there's a kind of connectedness to it, particularly around what people are, continuing. We've done shows on nationalism before, right? And so that's kind of where I think a lot of this is playing out. It has not gone away.
No.
It was funny. We were kind of prepping for even today and saw like some of the old episodes we were doing. I was like, man, we did that like 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I don't remember what it was. And it's just like a key. It's like a bad penny. People don't use pennies anymore. I guess if it's a digital penny, I don't even know what.
I don't know the phrase. So
we have to find a new colloquial. You don't know about the bad penny? It's just like it keeps popping up. It's like
I don't
know.
It.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I take it.
I'm uncultured, so I'll just assume that I'm missing something.
Okay,
not that you've said something.
Well, I will respect that and keep it.
You are indeed uncultured.
That's right.
And weird. So thank you for that, Marcus. I'll hold on.
Yes. So let's get into it. Right. We've got a great guest. I'm really excited to bring this cat in here today. He is the founder of the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, and a New York Times bestselling author. He's got a book coming out later this year. We're going to maybe dig into some of the things in there. You guys get a little sneak peek into the book. It's called Backslide: Reclaiming a Faith and a Nation After the Christian Turn Against Democracy.
Wow.
What? Can't wait. Find out what all that means. It's going to be fantastic.
Turn against
No, I know we're going to get into it.
Robert's
and it doesn't,
out here picking fights.
But there's people who've probably read him before. He's written The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy, White Too Long. And so at the end of White Christian America, look, and I just want everybody to know when he comes in here, this is a white dude talking. So if you get mad about all the titles, it's a white guy talking. So don't bring all that heat in here. You know what I'm saying? But he writes on religion and politics and culture, a lot of stuff we talk about on here for outlets like The Atlantic, Time, New York Times, a frequent media commentator, and he's also an author of the Redeeming Democracy newsletter. So, man, I'm excited to have Mr. Robert P. Jones come into the place. How you doing, sir? How you doing, Mr. Jones, Mr. Robert? Good to have you on the show.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. Tell the folks kind of where you're coming from right now so they can get a sense of what part of the country you're in.
Yeah, well, I'm in Washington, D.C. Yeah. So I will say, though, I lived in Texas twice. So I know whenever I'm talking in Texas, I got to claim, some connection to Texas.
Yeah, right.
Give me a little bit of cred. So I actually went to first grade and kindergarten in San Antonio and Wichita Falls.
Okay.
And then I went to seminary actually at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. So I'm here for 4 years back in the day. So have some Texas connections. Grew up mostly in Mississippi, but I am living today and working in Washington, D.C.
Man, that's good. And what's interesting, you gave a lot of good Texas credit. San Antonio and Fort Worth, those are Texas cities. If you're going to get everything about Texas, you get in those two cities. I think that's the place where most people talk about when I travel around the world. Texas. Yeah, absolutely. They're like
Austin, they're like,
not quite Dallas, Houston, but when you get to Fort Worth and you get the Lone Stars walking down the street, you know what I'm saying? Like the Longhorns, walking down the street. Yeah, that's the real stuff right there. And San Antonio is such a great expression of the history of the state, and it's Mexican history too. So I think that's why it just makes those two those cities good. So we're glad you have some connection there. And tell us what DC's like right now. How's it? How's everything going in the midst of all the chaos that's going on right now?
Well, I was sort of chuckling to myself as you guys were talking about how are things in Texas. What's going on? I think it's the same thing. So. It still feels like a little bit of an occupation, I have to say.
Okay.
We've got, I can't go to work on the metro without running into the National Guard, roaming around with nothing to do, but just kind of roaming around in packs of 3s and 4s because they've just been deployed there. So that's still happening here. And then, of course, downtown, I've lived here 20 years and it's just remarkable to see at the Department of Justice, at the Department of Labor, these huge authoritarian-like banners with Trump's image hanging off of these big government buildings. I mean, it looks, I visited Cairo before, and I remember, seeing, the president's photo just everywhere, right? And in these kind of authoritarian states. And, it's looking more and more like that, here in DC.
Interesting. I know it's still happening, but I hadn't thought about the deployments in a while, and so that's really interesting to be thinking about that. And I just haven't been out there in a while.
So many news cycles has happened.
Oh, right,
exactly. It's not even. It's out of sight. I forgot that was still a thing.
Exactly. And just the authoritarian, the banners, it's a very. Again, I haven't been out there. I feel like I need to go just to go, just to get a sense of it. But I would feel it would be a very surreal sight given the nature and the history of the country.
And of course the rubble where the east wing of the White House used to be. It's now just a big pile of rubble.
Wow. That's right. Yeah. All these things that, you see the news story and then you're like, oh, what's the next news story? Because you forget about it, that they're building
all about it.
Now you are the founder of the Public Religion Research Institute. What exactly is that? What is the PRRI?
Yeah. Well, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization. We're independent. And we do research at the intersection of religion, culture, and politics. So I joke sometimes, like I'm the guy you invite to a cocktail party to stir things up. If anybody asks me what I do for a living, there's not much safe way to answer that question for me. But we mostly do public opinion polling and tracking of demographics, changing demographics in the country. But kind of what Americans think, and do analysis by religion, by race, by gender, whatever, but really slicing and dicing. But we're really paying attention to how religion in particular shapes people's public opinions about a whole range of issues.
So that seems, there's obviously some big general topics. Can you narrow it down? Like, what's the kind of, is there like a specific thing that helps us see how you guys, ask the question, if you will, in the midst of the research?
Sure. Yeah. So we just released, I'll give you one just hot off the press. We released just yesterday a big survey where we're just going in after all the kind of chaos in Minneapolis with that surge of ICE agents there, what Americans thought about that. So do they think that, these kind of surges in American cities make the cities safer or not? Do they agree with Trump's handling of immigration? Or not? Do they think that we ought to be rounding up undocumented immigrants and putting them in internment camps, for example, or not? So, we ask questions and we ask them in neutral ways, ask people who agree or disagree. Do they favor this policy or not? What we found, interestingly, though, is that in this last study that increasingly Americans think that the Trump administration has gone too far with the tactics and these kind of surges that, of course, resulted in the death of 2 U.S. citizens in Minneapolis. Like 6 in 10 Americans, for example, say they disapprove now of Trump's immigration policies, and that's up 2 points from just a year ago.
Wow. Okay, so we're here talking now about obviously Christians in the midst of this political environment we're in right now. And of course, the terminology that continues to come up is Christian nationalism. I've been interested, I don't want to get the cart before the horse on this. I know that's a place that you are spending a lot of time in the new book that you are writing about. Is that correct? Is that kind of where you're leaning in on this new book?
Yeah, no, it's a definite frame. I mean, because this is the, a kind of a sub movement within Christianity that has kind of essentially positioned itself to undermine American democracy. So yeah, I'm leaning into that in the new book.
Interesting. Is that the definition that you have for Christian nationalism? What is the definition? I don't think I've ever heard it articulated the way you did.
Well, I mean, one of the nice things about doing social science is that you actually have to define things. You can't just kind of go in and sort of throw a name around, right? So we actually do have a definition of Christian nationalism, and the way it works with public opinion surveys is, you also can't really just you could, but it wouldn't be that helpful to just ask people. So, do you consider yourself a Christian nationalist? It's sort of like asking people if they're a racist. You might get an answer, but it's not going to tell you very much
Sure.
if you get people to answer that question. So, what we do is we ask people a series of questions that are really around the kind of dominance of Christianity in the country. For example, we'll ask people. It's a series of 5 questions. I won't read all of them, but they're basically things like U.S. law should be based on the Bible. America should declare itself a Christian nation, or Christians should exercise dominion over all areas of American society. So it's questions like that. And then we give people, based on their answers across all 5 of these questions, a composite score. So what it means is that you have to actually answer all 5 of them a certain direction, right? To be classified as a Christian nationalist. When we do that, we find about 1 in 10 Americans, no matter which of those 5 questions we ask them, strongly agree with all those questions. And so we call those Christian nationalism adherents, right? The people who are just like all in, no matter what you ask them. We have another group of about 1 in 5 Americans that we call sympathizers, that they agree with those questions. They just don't strongly agree with those questions. So it means about 3 in 10 Americans kind of lean into that worldview that this is a Christian nation. Christians ought to have a kind of privileged place and ought to really dominate public life, and everybody else is kind of here as a second class citizen. So it's about 3 in 10 Americans who agree with that. Twice as many reject that view.
And those are just Americans. Those aren't necessarily Christian Americans. It's just
that's right. That's all Americans. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So how then do you guys define the Christian nationalism? Do you have a set definition that you?
No, the definition is literally how people answer those 5 questions, right? And so they get a composite score based on their answers to all 5 questions. So we score them on a scale of 0 to 1 in a kind of composite score, and if they're kind of up, say 0.75 to 1, their adherence, like it's like that. We kind of segment the scale. Yeah.
But you don't have like a suffice it to say a Webster's definition of Christian nationalism that your organization kind of puts forward. Do you use the?
We don't, because we're a social science organization.
That's interesting.
That's how we measure.
Yeah. Right? Wow. Okay. That's really fascinating. I'm pushing on it because I'm just not used to people coming at it with composites. You know what I mean? They usually have a good.
If I want to boil it down, it really is just the idea, that this is a Christian nation, and Christians really ought to have a privileged place in this country compared to everyone else. I mean, that's the kind of boil it down. That's what it really means. Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, obviously, on this show, we talk a lot about, colorful conversations about Christianity, culture, and race, right? So I'm interested. Do you see any places in which there's some sort of intersection in the terms of race? And I don't know, do you put any questions in there that helps us understand that? Like, help us get a little bit of that.
Yeah. So it's interesting that, there are really 2 groups. So I said it's only 3 in 10 Americans that are sympathetic to this view. However, there are 2 groups where 2 prominent groups, one political group and one religious group, where it's a majority view. So the political group may not be surprising, but it is 54% of Republicans, right? A self-identified.
Clutch the pearls. I had no idea.
Yeah, who adhere to this worldview. And then the other group is white evangelical Protestant Christians, right? So white, non-Hispanic, evangelical Protestant Christians. It's 2/3 of that group who adheres to this world.
That is a pretty big number.
Yeah. I think we
2/3 is.
It is big. We did a thing with Michael Emerson just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
He said very similar, and people were like, "No way, surely not." But so we got it twice now, people. Yes.
It is. It's 2/3 that embrace that view. So it does explain to you like why this has some power in current politics, right? Because it's become the majority view of one of our 2 political parties, and it's the supermajority view of the largest religious group inside of that one political party.
Now, Robert, would you say that number is growth, or like what would do we have data that suggests
like it's trending in a particular direction?
What it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago in relation to what it is now?
We don't have trends that go back that far. We have trends that go back about 4 or 5 years, and on these specific measures, and we don't see growth in these numbers, right? So they look fairly steady over the short kind of trend that we do have here. I will say, if you're kind of connecting this up historically, I do a little bit of this in the new book, Backslide. There is a fairly straight line between what we're calling the kind of Christian nationalist movement today and what we used to call the Christian right movement, right? It was kind of in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. Think the Moral Majority, the Christian Coalition, the Family Research Council, like those organizations, shared a lot of this worldview. They weren't talking about it in quite this way, but there's a continuity between kind of those groups and kind of where they were moving politically and the kind of MAGA Christian nationalist world that we have today.
So is there a distinction in the pursuit? The modern voice seems like it is really pursuing the power of politics. Like it really wants the power grab of it.
Yeah.
And that view, that back in the 80s, it felt like there was some aspect of that. Like I feel like they wanted to protect prayer in school. They wanted to have, like, those conversations have been going on for decades. But if somehow it didn't feel, maybe it's just that I was a kid and I didn't pay attention as much, but it didn't feel as power grabby then.
That's a technical word. We have a definition for that.
We're gonna do that.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like it feels like there's some shift in all of it, where it moved from, man, this is what the country should be, to we are going to make it that thing. Is that true, or is that just a recent bias?
I think that's dead on. That's really a good insight. Here's what's happened is the country has shifted. So, I mentioned this word moral majority. That was a term that back in the 80s, even the 70s, that this Christian right movement was using. And they were arguing, look, we just got to turn people out to vote, and there'll just be more of us than everybody else if we turn everybody out to vote. So we'll just kind of change it that way.
Yeah.
So here's what's happened, though, in the last 20 years is that because of demographic changes in the country, so that depended on there being kind of a super majority of white Christians in the country, right? That they could just turn out to vote. But what we've seen is in the last 20 years, we've gone from being if you just kind of demographically speaking, a country that was a majority white Christian country. So if you think like the Bill Clinton years, the 90s, if you just looked at the demographics, white non-Hispanic Christians made up nearly 70% of the country back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. But what happened is by the time in the 2000s, that number had dropped to like 54%. So when Barack Obama was running for president in 2008, 54% of the country. So still majority white and Christian. Yeah. But just 8 years later, by the time Obama's out of office, that number's gone to 47%. And the number is 40% today.
Yeah.
Right. So now we've gone, just think about that, from the 90s to now, we've gone from being like 70% to 40% white and Christian. So that means that like, you can no longer just say, oh, there's more of us than everybody else, and we'll just turn people out and we'll win. It does become, as you put it, becomes very power grabby, because you don't have the numbers, right, for democratic processes to work. And so you start reaching for gerrymandering, voter suppression, these other kinds of ways, right? And sheer power, exercises of power, because the numbers have shifted in a way that, even in Texas, I was just looking this up, which people don't think of as maybe it's not California or New York, but the demographics in Texas is, as you all were saying, I mean, it's a pretty interesting place, and so, for example, there are more Christians of color than there are white Christians in Texas. Like that's notable, right? And that's something that I think many white Texans might not quite know. That if you take like white evangelical Protestants in Texas, which are pretty powerful bloc, right, in Texas, but they're only 14% of the population today in Texas, right? Really? So that's pretty notable when you think about that.
Wow.
So like African American Protestants are 9%, white evangelicals only 14%, and the one that everybody and if you look at people who no longer claim any religion, it's 21%.
Right. Yeah.
Percent.
That's a growing one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting. As you were kind of checking off the numbers from the 90s to now, and thinking about even the way in which I think there's a stereotype of Texas to believe that its power block of white, evangelical Protestants would be much higher. It's a pretty steady, if not pretty fast moving decline in our lifetime. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that why people are freaking out right now? Like my white brothers and sisters and evangelical Christians, is I feel like when I watch my brothers and sisters do what they're doing, and I'm watching them say what they're saying, that doesn't even line up ultimately with the Gospels. And I'm just like, what is happening with you all? I feel like you've lost something. You're lost yourself in something, right? Like, so I don't know, maybe you can explain, like, why are my white Christians freaking out right now? I mean, is it that stuff, or is there other things that are playing out in the midst of that?
Yeah. Well, I think you said in the intro, but just so everybody who's listening, not watching. So yeah, I'm a white dude. And I grew up in this world. So I grew up Southern Baptist, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You went to Southwestern. You were over there right at the spot.
Grew up Southern Baptist. My family is Southern Baptist all the way back, 6 generations. And so, this is a world I know very well from the inside. But it is remarkable. I mean, these changes have come very fast. So again, if you just look at white evangelicals, you go back just 20 years, turn of the 21st century, just white evangelicals themselves, of which the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest denomination, right? Just that group was nearly a quarter of the country just by themselves. And today nationally, they're 13% of the country, right? So they've been cut by half in terms of their share of the population. And that's true, as I mentioned, in Texas. Texas is only 14% in Texas. And so part of it is, looking and where they've been losing members is among young people. Right. So you can also see the median age go up. So the group has been shrinking and the median age has been going up at the same time. So I think the median age of white evangelicals in the country today is 58 years old. In the country, the median age is something like 45, right, in the general population. So you can kind of see what's happening there. And I think this sense of, you may not know the statistics, but you do see your children, your adult children, if you're kind of a boomer, you see your adult children and your grandchildren not going to church, right? The way that you thought they would, or the way that you did growing up. So you see the numbers dwindling that way. And I do think that I've actually joked sometimes. It's kind of the great white freak out moment that we're, it's fear at the end of the day. And loss, you mentioned the word loss. I think that's really important. I think the cocktail that you see is something like fear, loss, and nostalgia, right? And those things can be fairly toxic if they kind of all get mixed up together. And then you do end up doing things like, making kind of rationalizations. Well, things are so bad, things are so dire that these principles, I can just set aside my principles, right? Because I need to achieve this end. And that end, and but that's a straight up utilitarian way of thinking. It's not a principled or kind of more morally kind of rigorous way to live one's life. But you're reacting out of fear and kind of really desperately trying to hold on to this world, frankly, where you saw yourself as the dominant force and dominant population.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that desperation word is what I've been carrying for the last couple of weeks. Like, it feels desperate.
Yeah,
that's it.
And desperate does encompass all those things: fear of loss, all your angry energy. There's survivalism in the middle of all that. I sympathize a little bit with the idea. Like, I can understand some of that, because, like, if you think about, you think about what's the face of the country, right? And so if you think about, like, if I were drawing on a sheet of paper with an elementary school, and I'm drawing a representation of nations, right? And I say, what's the face of China? Like, we all have a face. And what's the face of Nigeria? We have a face. In Germany, we have a face. And when you get to America, you have to ask yourself, what's the face of America? And traditionally, I think we would probably have had a white person, but if it's truly representative, it could be any face.
The face is getting browner and browner every year.
Yeah, right.
It could be any face, and there's something about that when Trump says you won't have a country, I think there's something about, like, that's the picture that comes in my head. Like, you are no longer going to be the face of your country, quote unquote, your country, and there's something that feels like I've lost my home to someone that's not me, and that's what I think some people are feeling. It feels like, and I don't agree with that, but I follow the logic in some emotional way, and want to figure out, like, how do we move people, from feeling that sense of desperation to the opportunity, the unique opportunity that America provides us, and certainly the kingdom of God provides us. But anyway, I was teasing those things out.
Yeah. Well, I've got one little metaphor that I think about a lot. So I actually worked at an antique auction in Fort Worth when I was there. I was the guy who carried out the furniture and turned it around, and they carried it off the stage after the bidding was over. And every now and then I'd snag a deal, right? If there weren't people bidding on it, was a slow night or something. And I ended up picking up a dining room set that was from the 1940s. I noticed when I got it home, I didn't really pay attention. But then there's 6 chairs, and one of the chairs is different than all the other chairs. Right, that chair is bigger and wider, and it has arms on it. It's the only chair, the other 5 don't, right? And I was like, okay, and the only place it'll fit is at the head of the table. It won't fit around the side. So it's actually called the captain's chair. Like I kind of looked it up architecturally. It's called the captain's chair. And it was meant for the patriarch of the family, right? To sit, the father to sit there and preside over dinner in this kind of hierarchical, patriarchal sort of way of thinking about the family. And I begin to think of that as kind of a metaphor for, I think, how many white Christians have thought about the country, is that they have thought that like my seat is the captain's chair, right? I'm the one sitting and presiding over. And even when we've said, okay, we're going to welcome other people in, it's been this kind of, it's my table. I'm inviting people to pick up a chair, right? And I'm being the gracious host, but still in the place of power. And I think where we're at is that the country is changing in such a way that the reality is there's really no one sitting in that captain's chair anymore, right? There's no dominant group in that way, but there's still a group of us trying to insist that that's our chair and we need to sit in it. And so I think the invitation really is to think like, can we just get away? Can we just kind of put that chair away? Like one way we dealt with it in my family is that I put my daughter in that chair, right? So that was her seat. Right at the table as a way of just kind of like mixing up the politics, and not reinscribing it. But I think that's a good metaphor for like, we're going to have to kind of figure out, can we come around the table on equal basis, right? Where nobody is kind of playing the gracious host and the power broker role. But, it's when you're used to sitting in that chair, or even thinking of yourself as sitting in that chair, it's a hard thing to give up.
Yeah.
Especially if you believe that the greatness of the country is the product of you being there.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So now not only are you giving up you and your spot, but you feel like you're giving up greatness. You feel like you're giving up hence to make America. You feel like you're giving up what made America what it is and why it ascended to the top or whatever. And we did that. And so if we're not in the captain's chair, then decisions are going to be made that would cause us to no longer be great.
Yeah. Or in the strongest version of it, it's that God wants white Christians in that chair, and if white Christians aren't there, somehow that's against the will of God. I mean, that's the strongest version of this Christian nationalist, worldview.
Yeah. And I think there's 2 things I want to talk about. You just transitioned to thinking through, our Department of War secretary, if you will, has been recently just kind of done that in the sense of, connecting this war that's happening over in Iran and the things, and just war period, to sort of a holy war, and really connecting it to this, I guess, this tattoo that he has on his bicep. It's got, if God wills, and it's connected to the Crusades and things like that. I don't know how is that being. Are you asking questions about that in your surveys, or how's that hitting you today?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just say this is. I wrote a piece actually right after his Senate confirmation hearing because I was really frustrated that no one really took him to task about because it's one thing you like kind of tattoos are a very kind of personal expression, and you might want to kind of give somebody some leeway or whatever. But he also wrote a book called American Crusade.
That's right.
Where he interprets for us what he means by those tattoos. So it's not subtle. It's not, and he basically just says like, things like, you should thank a crusader if you enjoy the benefits of Western civilization, like those kinds of comments, in the book. And it's really, and he talks about maybe the need to use violence, right, to preserve this vision of kind of Western civilization. He has disparaging things to say about Muslims, in the book. And so he's just brought that frame straight into the job there. But yeah, I mean, he's got the Crusader tattoos on his chest. He's got Deus Vult, the Latin for God wills it, tattooed on his bicep above a sword, an assault rifle, and an American flag, like all in one arm. Right. And that phrase, Deus Vult, has historically was, historians kind of used by the Crusaders as they were kind of invading Jerusalem and killing Muslims. But it's also been used more recently by white supremacists, right? Including those who opened fire and killed dozens of Muslims at prayer in a mosque in New Zealand. It showed up in Charlottesville in 2017 at that Unite the Right rally. It showed up on January 6th in the insurrection here in DC. So it's a kind of far right white supremacist trope, right? That is also kind of wrapped up in this Christian nationalist view. It's not a joke. It's very, very seriously. And, he's standing behind the dice with the official Department of War, seal, and he's literally reading scripture and overlaying this idea that the U.S. is the instrument of God against the forces of evil, and conflating that with Iran in the world.
I mean that is extremely disturbing, and again, to your point that we said even earlier, like I feel like, and you were saying it, and nobody's bringing him to task from that 2/3 of white evangelicals, if you will, right? Like I'll just say it from an evangelical standpoint, like it's just not getting brought and talked enough about. And I think another thing that's kind of, I'll say, just to let my white brothers off the hook for a second, it's not just white people, right? Like who are kind of owning Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So help us understand that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's right. So, it's interesting though. It's complex, but yeah, certainly when we look at, like who's most likely to support, Christian nationalism, it is white evangelicals are kind of in their own category. Again, 2/3 of them supporting this worldview. But we do find we kind of break it down. For example, the next group down after them are actually Hispanic Protestants. They also tend to be evangelical. So part of it is that kind of evangelical theology, but it's 54% of Hispanic Protestants in the country. And, African American Protestants.
Wait, hold on just a second. You said 54%
of Latino
Hispanic
Protestants. Yeah.
Are Christian nationalists?
Yeah, or either qualify as either adherents or sympathizers.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, that group voted for Trump about 6 in 10.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I knew it grew. It grew. I didn't realize it was over 50%.
Over 50%, yeah.
That's a number.
Yeah, those are the only two groups, actually, and both of those groups voted for Trump in the last election. Among African American Protestants, it's 43%. Though even among African American,
way more than you would think.
Yeah, here's the thing, though: it doesn't translate. Interestingly enough, so those views inside of African American circles are actually, they function differently than they do in white and Latino circles. They don't translate as clearly one-to-one to anti-immigrant views. They don't translate as one-to-one to anti-Muslim views, for example. So there is something, particularly I think, about the sort of white identity mixed with Christian nationalism that when we look, and we can actually document it. So I'm not just kind of like making this up.
Sure.
That if you're looking at anti-immigrant views, anti-Muslim views, anti-Semitic views, misogynistic views or patriarchal gender roles, like all of these specific things, and you sort of take people who are might identify as Christian nationalists, but you add whiteness, and it adds about 8 to 10 points of support for anti-Muslim views or anti-immigrant views. So it's kind of both. It's the Christian nationalist orientation, but then it is kind of white identity that kind of turbocharges those views to these kind of xenophobic, in these more xenophobic directions.
Now, I mean, obviously, you're doing a lot of social science, and you're getting a lot of statistics and data and things of that nature. That's kind of just charting where the country is, where religion is, Christianity is, those kind of things. Is there any, like, how do you combat that? Like, is there anything that you guys are talking about of like, hey, here's how to move in a different direction, or here's how to combat that? Is any of your work in that space as well?
Well, I mean, we're not an advocacy organization, so we don't really make prescriptive, kind of recommendations or strategy books or anything like that. But I will say that I do think there's just this fundamental divide, and it's been with us since the beginning of the country. All right, okay. I mean, there has been, actually even before the beginning of the country, I've kind of written about this in other books, but this vision, right, of America as primarily a promised land for European Christians. Maybe that's another way you could just define it.
Sure.
Right? Christian nationalism, like this idea. So even in, I'm here in DC, you go to the Capitol Rotunda today, and, there are what I would call Christian nationalist paintings in the Capitol Rotunda. So, for example, there's one that is, I'm from Mississippi, right? So there's one that's the Discovery of the Mississippi by Hernando de Soto in 1541. There's a painting.
Sure.
And it's 8 feet by 12 feet. It's huge. It's one of only 8 paintings around the
Wow.
kind of bottom floor of the rotunda in the U.S. Capitol. And if you look at that painting, it's got, De Soto, right, with all of his European forces, and they're armed, right, and they're pushing a cannon into a Native American village, right. That's the portrait. So there's literally teepees, Native Americans, and they're pushing cannon and kind of armor and spears and stuff into the Native American village on this one corner. And if you look at the other corner, they've also dug a hole, and they are standing up about a 20-foot cross in the Native American village, right, on the other. So cannon on one side, cross on the other. Like, that image, right, it predates the country. And so I think that part of, where we go is like, we've got two choices here, right? So we can either be that vision of the country, a kind of promised land for, people of European descent, like that's who we are, or, they're the other path. And I think there are places in the Constitution and all that, even though it was only partially realized at its inception, or we can be a pluralistic country where everybody stands on equal footing before the law, regardless of race and religion. And like, I think this year, and one of the things I hope the book will speak into, we're going to have this big debate because on July 4th is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Right. And so we're going to, we're going to have Juneteenth, then July 4th, and then all the way, and we're going to have a big election cycle into the midterm elections, right? So it's going to be this big old fight over who are we as a country, who do we want to be as a country, with these clashing visions, right, coming together. So I think, the thing is just to really, for those of us who support democracy and pluralistic democracy, we've got to like lean in and defend that vision of the country. And I think we are seeing more people speaking up, and I've said a lot about where I think white Christianity is really undermining democracy. But I will say, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, we had a fair number of white clergy showing up and putting their bodies on the line, and getting between ICE and other people, and getting arrested. It looked like some of the clergy photos you might have seen from the 1960s and the civil rights movement. So there's some of that happening as well, and kind of waking up, I think, among some quarters of white Christians as well.
Yeah, and what I appreciate is I know that the writing that you've been doing has been trying to wake up other Christians in the midst of all of this stuff too. And one of the things we like to do, I know we're getting close to the end of the time with you, but one of the things we like to do with folks who come on the show is kind of run them through just a couple of questions right at the end that kind of work in a framework that we have created inside of a curriculum we call the Resilience Roundtable. And it's earns right now, you personally, but then also like, what are you curious about, particularly with those who maybe don't necessarily agree with the thought process you might have? Like, what are you curious? What makes you curious about their thoughts? And then have you found compassion? Like, are there ways that you're finding compassion for people who don't necessarily agree with you? And then also, like, is there what can we celebrate right now, or what are you celebrating right now? So those are kind of four questions we like to engage. So I'll ask them kind of
four
one
small
by one.
questions. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah. So you got a couple minutes, but the first question is like, is there something? Where are your concerns right now as you kind of look at the status of where America is in the midst of the war?
Yeah, I have to say I'm increasingly concerned about the midterm elections, and not from, again, we're a nonpartisan organization, but just from a election integrity perspective, we're just seeing so many signals that there may be all kinds of interference and undermining of free and fair elections. So I think, I think that's really important. So we've got people listening in. If you can volunteer to be a poll worker, if you can volunteer to be a poll observer, if you can contribute to election protection kinds of organizations, that is a really important thing to do right now.
Okay. And obviously we've been talking about, and most of your books are dealing with ways in which you're put up is white nationalism. Yeah. Is there anything that makes you curious about that group? Like something that you're like, I'm leaning in and I'm listening to that. I'm curious about it.
Yeah. I am seeing, I think that there, it's not all one thing. And I think we are starting to see some fissures there. And I'm kind of curious about that. There's a big gap between, the slogan that's always been, just to be clear, kind of racist and xenophobic, but the America First slogan, right? And then, the current foreign policy that we're seeing touted out by this administration. So I think that's a challenge. The other thing I'm interested seeing is that there's this kind of anti-Christian bias task force that the Trump administration has set up. But I think what hasn't, and there's been some Christians pushing back on this, that a lot of these policies and the violence has been meted out toward, well, ostensibly aimed at undocumented immigrants, but it's caught many more people, in the net, like I said, including 2 U.S. citizens killed in Minneapolis. But these policies are targeting other Christians in many ways, right?
Wow.
And I think that's really important. And one of the things that we're seeing, I'm kind of curious, we're actually seeing Christian groups suing the current administration over ICE, for example, arresting people at churches.
Yeah.
Which historically has not been a thing any administration, Republican or Democrat,
Right.
has done. And there's very little support for that. I mean, we just polled on it. It's only like 30% or something support ICE arresting people at sensitive locations like churches and hospitals and schools. So there's other places where I think there's some pushback on that. So I'm interested in kind of those fissures, I guess, what I'm curious about. Yeah.
Nice. And where are you finding compassion for those folks on the other side of your thought process?
Well, look, this is sort of like the 4th book I've written in this vein. And I think it is. These are my people, right? I've got this bookshelf behind me. I've got a Bible from my mother's side of the family that's 200 years old. That got handed down through my mother's side of the family, and I take it really seriously. I don't see myself as sort of being on the outside, wagging my finger at other people. These are my people. And so I think part of what's, even when I'm angry, I think it's angry because I think we can be better than we are. Yeah.
And now, anything you're celebrating, anything kind of giving you life in the midst of all this?
Oh, like it's the little things, right? I'm looking for, we're here in DC. Just like literally little things like, the crocuses in my yard are up, right? Along with the daffodils. I'm like, you know what? New life. I'll take it right now. Any little sign of new life, renewal, all that stuff. I'm trying to lean in.
I love it. Well, Robert, we'd love having you on the show and just being able to kind of get in on some of these issues. Christian nationalism seems to be just a topic that is just going to keep coming up. And I think it's so great that people get connected to, the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, and just being able to kind of watch and see how you guys are polling and finding out. Obviously, we're learning stuff on the show like that we just had no idea about. And I think, obviously people have their thoughts about stats and data and things like that, but it is a data point, right? It is something to kind of look at. And I think even as we eyeball things that are going on, what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that we can, at least from a conceptual standpoint, go, I think I see the movement of that for sure. And so I'm really excited about the work that you're doing and appreciate it. And I know just for our listeners, when is the book Backslide, Reclaiming a Faith and a Nation After the Christian Turn Against Democracy? When does that come out? Just so everybody knows when that's heading out.
Probably the most important thing to say is it's available for pre-order right now.
There you go. I love that. Yes, fantastic.
But it is. Yeah, it is. It will drop and ship day after Labor Day. So on September 8th there, but it is available for pre-order right this moment. There's an audiobook as well. You can get an ebook, audiobook, hardcover, all available and dropping on September 8th.
Man, I love that. And so much of what he talked about here today is going to be in that book. And so if you're listening to this, you're like, I want to go deeper in on some of those things. We're going to have a lot. There's a lot that's more. You'll be unpacking graphs and charts and things of nature that we
a little more theology too. In that book, actually.
That's fantastic.
Empathy and truth and things like that.
My goodness.
Yeah. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'm already like intrigued about it and can't wait to get it myself.
Yeah.
So, Robert, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for coming in and being a part of Color Commentary. It's been fun to have you in. And those who are listening, we love bringing in folks that are going to give you just a different perspective, that are going to help you look through different lenses and try to see the world through different perspectives. And so it's the reason why when we get to the end of our show that we always tell you to stay colored.